Welcome in to One of One Sports. We are officially in the final stretch of this college football regular season, and as always, there are huge games to break down. But before we get into all that, how did we do last week? And it was an okay week, good for our breakdowns. We went 4-1. We got the Clemson game right, the Georgia game right, we got South Carolina, but unfortunately, we did miss. Thought Kansas State was going to be able to beat ASU, got that one wrong. And then on the non-breakdowns, it was a bit of a struggle. 2-3 week. Thought BYU was going to be able to beat Kansas. Picked LSU to beat Florida, which hurts because I've been picking LSU to lose that game for a while in my head. Picked in the regular season. I've been talking on this channel about how LSU's overrated, but then I wasn't sure about DJ Lagway's health, so I backed off, picked LSU, and then he was fully healthy and Florida won. And once I saw he was fully healthy, I wanted to change my pick. I'd already made the video though, so that one was unfortunate. But yeah, 2-3 on those. So we're 82-37 on the season for overall, 46-14 on breakdowns. So it's been a good year. Let's see if we can finish strong though these last couple of weeks. And starting off with the notable games, the first one I was going to talk about is Nebraska over Wisconsin. And I do think with Wisconsin firing their OC and Braden Locke not playing his best ball, Nebraska, you start off 5-1, you're now 5-5. I feel like you've got to get to bowl eligibility. It would just be a devastating blow to continue this streak of not making it to a bowl game after the start they had, the optimism that was building around the program, to make sure nobody's transferring out of there, they don't lose hope. I feel like you got to win this game. I think Matt Rhule's going to have the team ready. I think they're going to win this one. I think Dylan Raiola will play well. And Wisconsin, I think it also hurts coming off a game where you were so close to beating the number one team in the country that a bit of disappointment from that game could potentially seep over into this game as well. I think Nebraska's going to win it in a close one, get to bowl eligibility, and I think they got to have this one. Maybe you could beat Iowa, your rival, in the final week, but you got to win one of these two, and I think they're going to get this one. Second game, and that's going to be Ole Miss over Florida. Not a hot take here, but we just saw what Florida did to LSU, winning by double digits. I believe it was 27-16. The defensive performance they put on LSU is impressive, although, with how LSU's been playing recently, it seems something went wrong with the offense a little bit, seeing what Alabama did to them, what Florida did to them, so maybe, the defense isn't actually that good. But the offense played pretty well as well, and we know that with DJ Lagway, the deep threat is there with Florida, explosive play threat is there with Florida, so Ole Miss is going to have to look out for that. I do think, though, Ole Miss off a bye, just playing too well, going to be too focused, needing to win these last few games, make sure they get into the college football playoff, maybe get into the SEC championship. I don't see an upset here, but it is a big game in the SEC nonetheless, so I wanted to give out my pick for it. I think it's the biggest spread of any of these 5 games here. Actually, no, this next one. Yeah. Virginia, I picked a few weeks back. I picked Virginia to upset Pitt on the road as about an 8-point underdog. And they were coming off a bye, but the last game we had seen them, they'd lost by about 30 to North Carolina at home. And North Carolina hasn't been a great team this year, and Pitt had only had one loss. I picked them to pull the upset. Now, last week, Notre Dame crushes them, and they're at home here against SMU, who's currently undefeated in ACC play, set up to go to the ACC championship, potentially make the college football playoff, and I think Virginia's going to get them. And here's one, I think Virginia's just been an underrated team all year. I'm not saying they're a good team. I don't think they're a good team, but I think they've been thought of as a terrible team, and by ACC standards, I don't think they're terrible. I think they're almost like a league average team in the ACC. 5-5, I think they could get to bowl eligibility with this win, which would be huge for them. This would be a massive win. But so I don't think they're that bad. And then on the SMU side, all you've got to do, you're looking at it, okay, we've got Virginia, and then let me pull up SMU's football schedule. But so you're sitting at 0 losses in conference play. And yeah, so you've got Virginia and Cal remaining, and Cal's at home. All you got to do is win one of them, and then you're in the ACC title. So I feel like there's a bit of relaxing maybe being done by SMU. You're like, oh, it's Virginia and Cal, so I feel like there might be a lack of focus. Virginia's they're going to be super focused, wanting to get to bowl eligibility, upset SMU, and I think they're going to do it. I think they're about 10-point underdogs. I think they win it outright in a huge upset this weekend. Called a couple weeks ago. Virginia was right. Hoping I can do it again. And then fourth, I've got LSU over Vanderbilt. And You guys know I'm an LSU skeptic. They're on a 3-game losing streak though, 6-4 on the season, and this is where I thought they'd be pretty much when I predicted them in the regular season. I think it was about 6-4, maybe 5-5 at this point. And yeah, so they're pretty much the team I thought they'd be. Vanderbilt's obviously much better than I thought they were going to be, and this should actually be a competitive game. But with LSU having the home field advantage, and I feel like that coaching staff isn't just going to let the bottom fall out. I don't think they're going to lose another game in a row, and I think they're going to get to the 7-win mark before their final game against Oklahoma. Maybe they'll be able to get to an 8-win season. The Vanderbilt side, this is a tough last stretch. You had South Carolina recently, now you have LSU, and then obviously you're going to end with your rival Tennessee in the final week. So you have another chance to pull off a big win. Next week, don't think you're going to get this one, though, on the road in LSU. And then finally, Arizona over TCU. Arizona has been really bad this year, and I root for them, and I had really high hopes for them this season. Thought they'd be able to win the Big 12. Obviously, has not been the case. Extremely disappointing season for them, and I haven't talked about them in a while. But they were able to probably play the best game they played all season against Houston. You need 2 straight wins to get to bowl eligibility. I think they can upset TCU as 12.5-point underdogs and set up a chance to maybe ruin Arizona State's season, who we'll talk about later in the video. But yeah, so I think they're pretty big underdogs here, and I think they're going to pull off a big upset against TCU. It could be, just bias and delusion after one good performance by them, but I'm going with it. So, moving on to our game breakdowns and starting off with the biggest game of the day, and it is Indiana at Ohio State. A massive one. Pretty much determines who's going to be in the Big Ten title against Oregon. There's that. Indiana's been undefeated. Ohio State just the one loss to Oregon. There's the Ryan Day top 5 games. Indiana's probably going to be ranked in the top 5 when the committee reveals their rankings, because I'm recording this before the rankings come out. But the video will be out Wednesday. So I'm imagining Indiana will be top 5, so there'll be that narrative. And overall, just a massive game in the Big Ten. So let's get into the keys to the game. And the first one I have is going to be, is Indiana for real, right? You look at the schedule. I'm sure you've heard other people talk about it. You probably thought it. There's been no one difficult on the schedule. The toughest game is probably Michigan, who's a 5-5 team, and obviously has been not very good this year, especially by their standards. So this is a massive step up in competition, and it does give the possibility of just being exposed. If Indiana's not for real, they'll get blown out by Ohio State, and let me try to say this clearly. There's a world where Indiana is like a good team, right? And there's a world where they're an okay team, and if they're the okay team, we should see them get destroyed by Ohio State. But if they're just an okay team, they shouldn't be able to keep it close. And all their questions about Indiana, I think, should be answered from this game. Because if you're on the road at Ohio State and you're not a good team, especially when Ohio State's going to be really focused because they need to win the game to get to the Big Ten title, I think you get blown out. So I think we'll figure out if they're a good team or not. Then secondly, I have the Ryan Day big game thing, because maybe you guys think it exists, maybe you don't. I kind of think it does. When he's obviously he can beat Penn State, but he's really struggled against Michigan. He lost the Oregon game, but we also see him be really competitive. He was right there in the Oregon game. He was right there in that playoff semifinal against Georgia. He's been to a national title. So I'm not saying he can't win the big game, but he does disproportionately lose those games, which makes sense. They're the harder games, but you're Ohio State and you're expected to win every game. And if you lose another top 5 matchup to Indiana, now we're losing to Indiana when Michigan's down, I don't think that's going to sit right with the fan base. And from that aspect, there's a lot of pressure on him to win this game. Third, I have the Ohio State O-line. Been really using a makeshift offensive line for large chunks of the season. And I think to beat Indiana, because I do think Indiana's a really good team. I think your O-line's going to have to play well, establish the run, give Will Howard time to throw when you do that. Speaking of which, the final key of the game I have is the Indiana secondary, because though Indiana has really good receivers and throws that back shoulder really well, I trust Ohio State has the talent to match up more than I trust Indiana's secondary has the talent to match up with guys like Igbuka or a Jeremiah Smith or a Carnell Tate, and the receivers the caliber of which Ohio State has. So secondary, it'll be interesting to see how well it can hold up. and how well the Ohio State O-line performs as well. Been kind of a mixed bag from them this year. So, final prediction. Ohio State is a pretty large favorite, about 12.5 points. And this is a game they should win. You're the more talented team. You're at home. You look at the NIL, how much money they're spending on the roster. I mean, you're Ohio State, and they're Indiana. But it's been a weird football season, and Indiana's off a bye. I think they might have the better coach. I think they might be better prepared. I think they execute better than Ohio State, and I think they upset Ohio State. I've got the Hoosiers winning 30-24, handing Ohio State a second loss and setting up Indiana-Oregon in the Big Ten Championship in what could actually be like basically a home game for Indiana to maybe be the number 1 seed in the college football playoff, which would be a whole other crazy thing we could talk about on Sunday's video if it actually happens. Don't need to talk about it now, but yeah, I think Indiana's going to win this game outright in a massive, massive development in college football. Second game breakdown, and that's going to be Colorado versus Kansas. Now, surface level, Kansas is like a 4-6 team, I think. Colorado is probably like a top 15 team now. Playoff favored to make the playoff at first. Why are we doing a breakdown for this? But Kansas has just beaten Iowa State, kind of ruined their season a little bit. Then beat BYU, kind of ruined their season a little bit. Those were the top teams in the Big 12. Now Colorado's the top team. Are they in trouble too? I thought it was worth talking about. And so starting off with the keys to the game, I think is Colorado going to finish strong is a pretty big thing because when you look at this, it's a long college football season. And it seems like Colorado's peaking at the right time, which is good. But I think teams like Colorado, where depth can be an issue, or where you haven't been to this level before and this is your first time, I think there's always a chance of you running out of gas before the finish line. And that can't happen for them because, yes, it's Kansas and Oklahoma State, but Kansas is playing better right now. And Colorado is not the level of team where you can give a C-level performance or B-minus level performance and necessarily still win. So I think you got to be finishing strong, playing your best ball now at this point in the year. You can't run out of gas. And since we've never seen them here before, I think it's an important point to think about. Then second, talk about is Kansas peaking, right? Like I mentioned, against Iowa State, played one of their best games of the year. The offense looked really, really dynamic. Beat them when they were, 7-1, one of the top teams in the Big 12. Almost knocked them out of playoff contention. They're still slightly alive. And then you do a similar thing to BYU, who was undefeated. You go into BYU, give them their first loss, and really make it so the Big 12 is only getting one team in the playoff. But so Kansas seems to have figured it out. Jalen Daniels is playing his best ball this season, and that makes them a dangerous team, way more dangerous than they were, say, 3-4 weeks ago for Colorado. Third, this Colorado run defense. You have Jalen Daniels. You have Devin Neal. Kansas would like to run the ball, but Colorado's run defense has been really, really good recently, from basically that Kansas State game. Actually, really from the UCF game. They defended the run really well against UCF, who runs the ball great. Same thing against Kansas State, and then did it again recently, out-rushing Utah. The run defense has been there. The pass rush has been there. The overall physicality on the D-line has been there. They got to keep it up, limit Devin Neal in Kansas. And then finally, the Kansas secondary. When you have the weapons Colorado has with Shepard and Hunter and Horn and Wester and Miller, Kansas, I don't think, has the secondary to hold up, and I think Colorado is poised to put up a lot of points. So who do I think wins this game? I think it'll be a decent amount of points put up, and ultimately I do think Travis Hunter, Shador, and Colorado in general playing too well right now. Too many big-time players making big-time plays for them. I think they win it 37-28, a little bit of a strange score. But yeah, that's what I'm going with. Colorado win and clearly covering the spread, since I think the spread's only got to be like 4 points or something like that. But yeah, big win for Colorado, and then sets them up for one game left to win to make it to the Big 12 title and play for a spot in the playoff, which obviously would be huge for them. Moving on to our third breakdown, we have the Texas A&M Aggies facing off against the Auburn Tigers. Another one of those weird ones where you're like, Auburn's not really a good team. Texas A&M's one of the top 15 teams in the country. They've been really good. Why is this a game breakdown? But then you look at the point spread, and A&M's only favored by like 3 points. And you also look at the situation in the game where A&M's, basically playing for their playoff hopes and to maybe go to the SEC title. making it, a really large scale game in that regard. So I thought it was worth breaking down. And my first key of the game is going to be the Auburn run defense with A&M, full-time commitment to Marcel Reed now. Obviously, you're going to want to be able to force A&M to throw the ball. Not saying he can't throw, but the threat is more so with his legs than with his arm. So you want A&M to throw the ball, and to do that, you got to contain his running the ball and contain Texas A&M's ground game in general. So the Auburn run defense is huge. And then the second thing, which I think is the clear second biggest part of this game, is it a look-ahead spot? When you got Texas A&M with the renewal of the rivalry against Texas next week, and what everyone's saying, that'll be the winner of that game will be in the SEC championship, the loser's out. Well, that's only the case if both teams can win this week, and I'm pretty sure Texas will beat Kentucky. I'm more concerned about A&M on the road against Auburn. Are they overlooking them? They shouldn't be, but I think there's a risk that they could be. And then third, Peyton Thorne. I don't trust him. And, he's had some crucial turnovers, and it hasn't been all bad. There's parts where it's like, okay, this guy can be a good quarterback, and then he does something crazy, loses you a game, makes a terrible decision. You can't have that, right? If you're going to win this game, you need Peyton Thorne to play well for you. I don't necessarily trust him to do it, but he's a key to the game nonetheless. And finally, this Auburn O-line. Pretty much every A&M game I've broken down, I point out the other team's O-line, because when you've got a Shamar Turner, a Shamar Stewart, and a Nick Scourton, these guys are just monsters on that D-line. They're going to bring pressure. They're going to get to the quarterback. They're going to get in the backfield. And Auburn's O-line, you're not going to win every battle, but you got to hold up really well or play. Even if Auburn plays their best from their O-line perspective, you're still going to lose some of those battles. So you got to have a really good performance to even be serviceable, I think. So I think that's one of the main advantages for A&M is on that defensive front. So who do I have winning the game? This is a spot that I think could be tricky for Texas A&M, but ultimately I think Auburn over the course of years found too many ways to lose games that I don't actually trust them to pull off an upset, just maybe make it close. That's why I have A&M winning 28-17. I think it'll be close for most of the game, and then like 21-17 late in the fourth, and Auburn makes a crucial mistake, and then A&M tacks on a late touchdown. It's kind of my thinking there. But close most of the way through, Auburn's probably leading 17-14. A&M takes the lead, and then Auburn turns the ball over or something like that. But yeah, I think A&M will find a way to win and set up a massive, massive game next week, which I cannot wait for when they face Texas and the renewal of that rivalry. It's going to be awesome. I digress, though, and our fourth game breakdown will be BYU versus Arizona State. Probably the game I'm most excited for this college football weekend. A spot in the Big 12 likely on the line. Not like the tiebreakers. You could have Iowa State sneak in over one of these teams. But in all likelihood, the winner of this game is going to be in the Big 12 title. And, that's all you got to say, right? So getting into the keys to the game, I think the biggest one, or at least the one that stands out the most to me, is just the BYU offense, because it seems to have disappeared a little bit. Certainly against Kansas, the offense was not good at all, putting up 13 points, turning the ball over in the end zone. But even against Utah, the offense didn't look the same. It was an offense that had been pretty good for most of the year while they were undefeated, and it's kind of fallen off a little bit. And the ASU defense is pretty good, just held Kansas State to 14, and they're not great. You can score on them. UCF did. Other teams have as well. But it's a pretty solid defense, and I could see the BYU offense struggling with how they've been playing. Second, I think the ASU home field, not that it's some massive home field advantage, like when you talk about Autzen Stadium with Oregon or the Big House with Michigan or Death Valley LSU. I'm sorry if I'm leaving anybody out. There's a ton of great home fields. I'm not saying that's what ASU has. I just mean that ASU is undefeated at home and has been clearly a better team at home. And I've had some big road wins, like last week against Kansas State, but they've been a great home team, and they're at home here. And I think that's a huge edge for them, considering how well they've played at home. Third is the BYU magic just gone. You were winning a lot of close games where the ball was bouncing your way. You were getting turnovers, the penalty against Utah, late touchdown against Oklahoma State. Just a lot of things had gone your way. And now that it's broken, is it just fully gone? And was it kind of just a luck thing? And could it be downhill from here? That's a concern I would have if I was a BYU fan. Finally, Sam Leavitt, the quarterback for ASU, Now, he was a redshirt freshman, and he's just continued to improve. He's playing really well. Even when Cam Scadaboo was out, he continued to improve. Now Scadaboo's back, and the receivers, Tyson and Gilroy, pretty good. And he's playing his best ball of the season, I think, making plays. And I think he's going to continue to do that. And that's why I think at home, ASU is going to pull off a huge win, beat BYU, and set up a likely showdown based on my picks between them and Colorado for the Big 12 title and a playoff spot. Now, like I said, there's a chance Iowa State backdoors in here if BYU were to also lose to Houston or ASU were to choke against U of A or something like that. But it would be increasingly likely that ASU Colorado would be the matchup based on my picks here. But yeah, I got Sun Devils over Cougars 30-27. And to wrap it up, we have Notre Dame Army in what is another top 25 showdown this weekend. Again, with huge implications in terms of Group of 5 playoff spot. Could Army steal it away from Boise State if they were to continue to be undefeated, win a game like this against what's a top 10 team? And then also, if Notre Dame's going to go down, they may probably lose their playoff spot, and that opens up another spot on the bubble if Notre Dame's gone. So a ton of implications for the playoff in this game. And it's just, it's just a great game to watch. Always fun to see Notre Dame play these service academy schools, especially when it's a good year for them. I'm looking forward to it. Getting right into the keys to the game. I think the Army run defense is huge because Riley Leonard, not the best passer in the world. So if Army can limit the run, both because Leonard's dangerous with his legs as well. So limit the run game from the running backs, but also from Leonard. Force Notre Dame to beat you through the air. I think it gives you a much better chance of winning. And then the competition upgrade. I don't know at this point in the year because the past couple Army games I didn't check. But I know when they were like 7-0, they hadn't beat a single team with a winning record. Not like at the time of playing them, but once they were 7-0 by that week, none of those teams still had winning records. So I don't know if that's still the case, but either way, Notre Dame is like leaps and bounds better than anyone Army has played this year. So like I was saying with Indiana, if Army's not actually good, you'll find out, right? This is such a steep upgrade in competition that the chance for exposure is higher in this game than in a lot of others. And then the Notre Dame run defense, I think, is huge because of the style of offense Army runs. And, it's not just stopping the run traditional sense. It's stopping that, like, wishbone option thing. And if you do that, then, Army's in trouble because that's the whole offense. But obviously, just saying run defense kind of boils it down a little bit too much. Probably could have been more specific there. But, yeah, just stopping this Army offense, which you don't see a lot, so it could give some teams fits sometimes, seeing something for the first time you see it all year, and the only time you probably see it all year is something to look out for. But Notre Dame does have the advantage of having played Navy already, but Navy kind of like self-imploded in that game. It was just turning the ball over constantly. I doubt Army does that and is a bit more challenging for Notre Dame to stop, and I think will be more competitive than Navy was. Finally, the talent advantage I think you got to mention. Now, Notre Dame's not like the most talented team, but they recruit well. And, it's just there's massive edges on the D-line and the secondary, overall physicality that Notre Dame has across the board and should be able to out-physical and out-talent Army over the course of a full game. So I do think Army's a very good team and can keep it competitive for a while. I think over the course of the game, Notre Dame slowly pulls away and eventually wins it. I'm going 35-24, Fighting Irish. And that's my final pick for the weekend. Make sure to leave a comment down below. Who do you have winning these 5 games? There are massive implications this week in the Big 10, the Big 12, the Group of 5, Notre Dame being on the bubble. Massive games all the way around. So make sure to let me know, who do you guys have? Make sure to leave a like, do me a huge favor, and subscribe. Until next time.